Jacques is a lawyer and partner with Gowling WLG. Is that WLG new?
Yes, about 4 years old. It stands for Rag Lawrence Graham, which is a law firm that we basically combined with about 4 years ago, and we have a global presence now. So From the roots of Ottawa, Gowling, as it was known, Gowlings, and even before that, Gowling and Henderson, has certainly grown around the world. We're very proud of that.
Very good. So you are, among other things, the chair of the Library and Archives Canada Foundation, which was established in, April 2019?
Exactly.
Welcome to the Bibliophile.
We actually began, I will admit, because we've got just a terrific board of individuals that I like to describe as great Canadians, and we actually started our work about 2 years before that, when we essentially had our Library and Archives Canada Strategic Advisory Committee, which ultimately recommended and recognized the need for the foundation, and we moved from there to actually launching the foundation then. So a fair bit of work took place in advance of that.
Very good, okay. So, and now you're about a year in.
A year and a bit, and it was certainly, I say that we are a year in, and we are focused in spite of these challenging and unprecedented days of COVID-19, as you probably know. We had to postpone our second annual Scholars Awards, Library and Archives Canada Foundation Scholars Awards, which was to take place on April the 22nd. But we're very motivated to do as much as we can in these interesting times.
So you're 1 year and one pandemic in. Yeah.
I'm hoping that by next year we will be one pandemic out and we'll be rid of that completely.
Yeah. Okay. So welcome to the Bibliophile.
Thank you.
Okay, you talked about the need. So what was the need? What's the need for a foundation?
Well, let me just start off by saying that when we look at the incredible collection that exists at Library and Archives Canada, which as you know really does hold the treasures, I think, to such an extent of our country. Whether it's documentary materials, books, artifacts. When one looks at other institutions, we can see that there are individuals that are passionate about those institutions and recognize the value and need for a foundation to be able to provide additional assistance through funding for programs that might not happen otherwise. When we look, for example, in our nation's capital, and I'm very proud of what we have, when you look at the National Gallery Canada, you look at the National Arts Centre, of which the latter I've been quite involved in over the years. Let me just add as well, I have to say that here you are on a radio station, CKCU, which is Carleton University, where I'm proud to say I'm a past chair of the board. Recognize that even there, when we're involved in these kinds of endeavors, we look for additional funding because there's only so much that might come from government.
Jacques, that was about 100 years ago.
CKC is not part of your show right now?
No, it was great. I started off doing a show there for about a year, but I was on at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was just too brutal. So I jumped to the podcasting site so that I could do this whenever I wished.
I see. So I thought I might be able to still hear you on CKCU in the morning, and even 6 a.m. I think the beauty of the podcast is you get to put that on whenever you want and just pop it into a show if you do that.
Exactly.
Well,
yeah.
That's a smart way to go for sure. But to answer your question, I mean, there are many routes as how I came to the role that I'm very honored to have as the chair of Library and Archives Canada Foundation. And it really started from several perspectives. And as I was preparing and thinking about, this conversation I was going to have with you, I thought of the people. I mean, life is about relationships. Life is about how we walk through life, who we meet, who influences us, who actually, motivates us to what we do.
Who we love and who loves us.
That's right. And sometimes, unfortunately, who doesn't love us and who we don't love, but that influences us in certain ways.
Sure.
Where we know how we want to be and how we might not want to choose to be.
Right.
But in my case, I was very fortunate in the context of Library and Archives Canada. It was actually Ron Cohen, who at the time was the president of Friends of Library and Archives Canada. And I look at Ian Wilson, who was just such a remarkable man as the first librarian and archivist of Canada, which he took on that role from having been the archivist of Canada. Following that work that I did on behalf of clients, I do a fair bit in the cultural side, and I was actually involved in a particular negotiation initiative, which I think was of great benefit to Library and Archives Canada, and that gave me a better sense of what was going on in that institution.
What was that?
Not long after it became what it did.
What was that?
Linking both libraries and archives.
What was that, Jacques?
And then what happened was I was very fortunate. I happen to love the law. I love working as I do with my clients and in my firm, but I also have a passion for writing, and I wrote children's stories. And I was given the opportunity of having 2 of my children's books launched at Library and Archives Canada. So there was a certain link that I felt with that, recognizing the incredible collections which it possesses. An amazing building as it is also on Wellington. It's now a building that's actually owned essentially by government services. But, there were so many different elements to it. And when I met with Guy Berthiaume, who was the previous Library and Archivist of Canada in Quebec, dealing with particular issues, because at the time he was a Quebec Library and Archivist, we essentially built a friendship. When he moved to his new position in Ottawa, we had many discussions. I introduced him to a few individuals. I felt, strongly that it was important for him to actually get a chance to, to quickly engage in the Ottawa environment. And he was kind enough to share with me occasionally some of the challenges that he would have in terms of being able to, to be able to grow and do certain things with respect to the collection. And I think he also felt that I had a strong sense for what incredible opportunities lie there to share the stories of Canada, to say who we are to Canadians, to share also, information relating to our culture, to our history, to our values. Not that wouldn't just be here within the boundaries of Canada, but could also be shared outside this country as well, to tell others who we are, what we are, and maybe even what we still have to learn. And in the context of my many conversations with Guy, he asked whether I would be willing to take on this role of determining whether we may be able to create a foundation. So that really was the start. I can tell you, it didn't take me very long to agree this was important. The few people that I reached out to all agreed that for an institution such as Library and Archives Canada, because it's a unique one, it is within Canadian heritage, so it doesn't have that standalone component as other galleries or museums may have, or as crown corporations. It's within a department because it has such an important role, obviously, as as an archive, as the documentary deposit for the country. But at the same time, it had such a rich collection, such an important role in being able to engage meaningfully across the country. And I say that in the context of Library and Archives Canada, from coast to coast to coast, Canada is our library. It is. And if that's the case, then we have to do everything we can to engage Canadians, other institutions, other libraries, other archives, institutions as well, to meaningfully create and to strengthen the partnerships that are there. I'm also very focused on education. All we have to do is look at where we are today in the world. We look at some of the challenges that we face, both here in Canada, clearly, looking at the neighbors also down south. In my estimation, education is so much the antidote, essentially, to dealing with many of the things we are facing right now. And I love the ability of being able to learn from our past, understand where we've come from, and hopefully that will allow us to engage meaningfully in ways that will improve us and may be able to improve others as well. You've also asked me, I think you asked me earlier, how I feel about books, and I come from a family essentially of jurists, doctors, but also writers. My mother did many things. She was a philosopher, she was a writer, she was an educator, she'd written many books, she built bridges. I think books are magnificent ways of building bridges, and my mother did that incredibly well. And I tried to borrow from that, so that there is instilled in me a wish that what we do at Library Archives Canada, what we do under the wonderful direction of a fantastic and a wonderful woman, our librarian archivist, she's so distinguished in her role, Leslie Weir, with her leadership and with an amazing board that we have of our foundation, can really enhance the opportunities, can really create opportunities. And I can't help but think about, the book, I'm sure you read the book by Susan Orlean, Library Book, which was one of the best sellers a couple of years ago. And I love, and I made reference to this actually at the launch of our foundation, where she says books are a sort of cultural DNA, the code for who as a society we are and what we know. All the wonders and failures, all the champions and villains, all the legends and ideas and revelations of culture last forever in books. Well, I got to say, it's this reason and much more that we really also take into account the archives within the astounding collection of Library Archives Canada. So we're tasked to protect it, but we're also tasked to promote it. And by virtue of being able to do that, I am convinced that we will be able to add the kind of value that is important that we actually add, to really enhance the visibility of LAC and really position it as a creative force in our cultural ecosystem, and to share knowledge of our past and make that history more accessible, helping inspire innovation and creation through its national and regional programs. That's very much what we want to be able to pursue as best as possible. So we have a significant mission. You may have seen what we had prepared in a brochure that I must say was very much a heart and soul effort. But there's one piece, Nigel, that I think you'll really appreciate when we say that the foundation will focus on sharing the treasures of our past and making history accessible, but it's also for the purpose of fostering innovation now and in the future and instilling inspiration to spark creation. I mean, it's amazing how when I've seen, kids walking through that Prime Minister exhibit that we actually had at Library and Archives Canada, the Wellington building, a few months back, you see these kids and they say, wow, like they were bringing life into the history. We're sharing artifacts that go back to early days of Canada. And I love it when we can share with Canadians stories about our soldiers from the First and Second World War and immigrants. Our immigrant story. We are a nation of immigrants, and we also have to blend that in with the incredible history that we have of our indigenous roots here. I'm a child of immigrants. I'm a first-generation Canadian. I appreciate these things. I recognize the importance of how blessed we are, and yet blessings we have, but also challenges that we have to address some of the things from our past, and maybe that will also help others engage. So that's very much the, how can I say, inspiration for the development of a foundation, the inspiration to make sure that we raise funds in ways that have not done before, and in ways that are done by other institutions that have less in their collections, but also great value to what it is that we can offer.
Well, you mentioned the need to start with, the need. I think on two fronts. First of all, funding of the library has been appalling over the last 25 years, and the exhibition program has been non-existent. So I would think that your participation is sorely needed because the political level hasn't been supporting Library and Archives Canada.
Nigel, as we look at the past, clearly, there were some very positive things done. I think that it was quite remarkable that at a particular moment of time, there was a decision made to bring together Library and Archives Canada together, from two institutions, and I really do credit Ian Wilson as well and Laurent Carrier. They were just, remarkable in being able to recognize that in a political force to do it.
Yeah.
One can say, when you look at, government funding, there are so many needs and there are so many requirements and there's only so much to go around. So
it's a question of priority.
I won't argue with you at all that there are times where, I think that there wasn't sufficient funding put forward. And you've just said it so well in the sense, priorities. What we don't want to do is necessarily always rely on government to address our priorities, which is exactly why you need a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very forward-looking, we're very positive in the approach that we're taking, and we recognize that the thousands of dollars, or hopefully the millions of dollars that we will be able to, over time, raise for this remarkable institution will, make all the differences in the world, and so that we don't just have to rely on government, because government has responsibilities for our healthcare, for our roads, for the environment. I mean, there are so many, and I had the privilege of working in government many years ago now, and I think about all those stresses and those pressures of how we got to address these issues through finance and Treasury Board, and Nigel, I know you know that as well. But how remarkable when you look at something like the National Gallery of Canada, or you look at the National Arts Centre. I mean, remarkable how over the last few years, they have been able to raise funds and be able to put those institutions into positions that they wouldn't have otherwise. That's my wish. That's my dream.
Yeah.
That we will be able to do things we couldn't do otherwise.
I mean, I think it's a very positive thing, what you're doing, and really necessary. Just want to reference a couple of the great archivists and librarians over the years. Arthur Doherty and Kay Lamb. And both of them, during the 20th century, made their priorities government priorities and took it right to the center. And I wonder if you see that as your role at all, to try to not just prioritize, but to make the political leaders understand that Canadian identity is really closely tied to National Library and Archives.
Yeah. Well, there's no question that I would expect, that there would be priorities very much aligned in terms of, the focus of what Library and Archives Canada should be doing in terms of promoting our culture, being able to tell our stories, and being able to do certain things like clearly, digitizing much of its collection. It is absolutely amazing when we talk about collection. First of all, people do not necessarily know, and I'm gonna answer your question in a moment, but people don't recognize that effectively, we've got 30 million photos there, 22 million publications, 3 million maps, 50 kilometers of archives, and 550,000 hours of audio and video recordings. Not to mention 425,000 works of documentary art.
No, I know we have got an amazing collection. In fact, I think it's the 4th largest in the world, but nobody knows about it. Nobody sees it.
Precisely. So to answer your question, I mean, I would think that there would be, intersection with regard to what those priorities are. But I want you to know as well, Nigel, and I believe that you would fully agree, there are certain things that we would call, it would be nice if we could, or wouldn't it be wonderful if we could? I want us to be some of the wonderful if we could. And just like you said, we want more exhibits. So we'll be going out to corporations and some of those institutions in Canada to be able to help us do that. We're going to want to make sure that Canadians feel that they're going to donate $15 or $20 or $25. That may go towards buying something that we would not otherwise be able to buy, or have a signature series even stronger than it is right now, where we actually can have great Canadians coming to Library and Archives Canada, speaking to audiences, but then also putting that online, that we can actually share those messages. And when you look at the costs, which are obviously implicated in this endeavor already, I mean, we're now building a second preservation center. I say hats off to Canada for that, recognizing that. That's a significant endeavor.
Preservation is important, but getting out to Canadians is
absolutely
even more
What's the
important.
Point of preservation. You're right, Nigel. What's the point of preservation if we're not demonstrating what's in there? And that's precisely what we want to do more of. We want to make it exciting. Because when you think about, I heard you the other day, a fantastic interview that you had with Leslie Weir. You were talking about the Lucy Maud Montgomery, collection. Nigel, you know about that, and there are others as well, but not nearly as many. But you obviously appreciate these things. That's what we want to be able to do more of. And there are collections out there that, if they have a Canadian historical cultural value, we will want to be able to purchase those so that they are here. There may be times where other institutions in Canada would be better off doing that. But if they're going to do that, Nigel, we have to make sure that we can actually have those digitized, that we have an ability of being able to link in through our websites, so that this is accessible to every school child in every classroom, to every individual in their living room, anyone that wants to access that. And more to that, so that it can speak to others outside of Canada, tell our story, to share who we are, what we are, all of those things that make this so exciting. We've got to be the competition in Netflix. That's my competition at the end of the day. Because we want people to learn, to internalize, but not just for themselves but then I use that word to spark creation, to spark innovation, add more into the public domain.
Well, look at what's the greatest outburst of patriotism in the past couple of years. It's a bunch of American basketball players winning for the Toronto Raptors. Now, that's fine. That's great for the city. It's great for camaraderie. But what does it say about Canadian identity?
Well, I think one thing about Canadians is, we like to feel good. We like to
we all do.
To enjoy good times, to be champions where we can be. And to your point, important to note, Library and Archives has the most unbelievable collection on sports materials. And we are actually working on making that more accessible to others, because we know that's what Canadians want, what they look for. But it's not just so that they can actually look at maybe a team that's won or is winning, but what is it that made that team what it is to have succeeded, to have won, and how can we then take that and that messaging and place that in other areas of our lives, whether it's in science, in literature, in math, and in whatever else it is that makes us the best, so that we can actually help humanity. That really is the goal.
Okay. So back in 1990, I think the archives budget was $110 million, and now it's $100 million. What are you going to be able to do as a foundation to get the government to pay more than that?
Well, that's a good question, Nigel. I want to tell you, I really do applaud, this minister, this government, for the fact that they have obviously done as much as they have in the last number of months, also in dealing with COVID-19. I'm very familiar with the initiatives underway to help the arts community. And, I think that's a demonstration of their recognition of the importance of this. Our Canadian flag, I think, is very much about how, we address culture and the arts, and how we address these, our history. I think the government recognizes that, but as a foundation, my hope is, because a foundation it's not really an advocate. We are a not-for-profit, a charitable organization, so it's not our task to advocate for more funding, but I'm confident by the good work that we do, I'm confident by what we share, what we show, there will be a recognition by those that pay attention to that in government to to necessarily appreciate the value of what that brings and their opportunity to engage further in that investment. Sometimes you have to invest funding for you to be able to access additional funding because it's recognized how valuable that is.
Well, it's like, you have to sort of buff up your website, make yourself look good before someone's going to give you more money.
I think clearly we learn from the past. I mean, when we look at, where we've had, highlights that have made a difference from that institution, and now we're about to embark, obviously, on a very, very new, set of chapters as we are, going to in 2025 be with the Ottawa Library, be much more accessible. There'll be exhibition space. Yep. All those things then say we will be a greater part of this community, but I hope we're also going to be able to grow that profile across the country in some of the other centers. That's something that we definitely want to do, which is why we have a board that reflects Canada, not just the National Capital Region.
Yeah.
And I do want to make reference to some of our board members because, it is a terrific board to which I'm so honored to be able to chair.
Okay, but just before we do that, I just want to introduce the fact that Canadians and Canadian corporations compared to American corporations are cheap. They give about a third what American corporations give. So how are these board members going to get these cheap corporations to open up their wallets?
Okay. Well, Nigel, I have to tell you, that is a motivation certainly for us. I think that, I'm seeing corporate Canada, in recent years maybe opening, their wallets open maybe a bit further. I think it's very important that we demonstrate to any of these corporations the value. We can do that better too. I think that there is an importance in doing that, and the level of engagement often comes from the innovative ways in which you can demonstrate the link to whatever organizations and its importance.
Yep.
I will share something with you. I learned something remarkably a number of years ago by being in touch with NARA and at the time working with their archivist, a gentleman by the name of Weinstein, who was just a wonderful, remarkable man.
Who's this, Jacques?
One evening in Washington, D.C., and they did have corporate America there. And I thought, why can't we do this here? It's incredible because it's one of the images that came to my mind as soon as Guy Berthiaume asked me, would I engage? Because NARA wouldn't have nearly what it had, and it gets a significant amount of government funding, but that additional, oh my Lord, this is what you can do if you have some corporate funding in there, how wonderful. So we are very mindful of the importance of working with companies across Canada. The first thing you have to do is explain what Library and Archives Canada is. And then the second question usually is, well, why would I have to give then, or why would we give to an organization that is essentially a government entity? Wouldn't they already get it? Well, then there's a story that goes along with that.
Yeah, well, they don't already get it.
Foundations, give to universities. Why do we do all that? So we go through that. But, in addition to that, it really does come down to demonstrating linkages. And I'm going to share something with you. I am someone that has tremendous respect for Air Canada. Air Canada came in as a founding sponsor on our Library and Archives Canada Scholarship Awards. And they did that after a tour that we had provided to their CEO, Kellen Rovanescu, and to one of their senior executive vice presidents, Ferio Pugiles. Would not believe how their eyes opened up because they were seeing videos of Trans-Canada Airways in the early days that they had not even known about, didn't know existed. And it just suddenly gave them a sense they're part of this institution as well. So we have a job to do. I want to be less critical of some of the companies because sometimes we don't know how to raise that profile and explain to them why they need to engage more, how important it could be. So I'm so grateful. We have a 5-year relationship now with Air Canada as a founding sponsor. That's a huge part of our program.
What was the deal?
The deal was $30,000 for 5 years, each of 5 years. And that's a remarkable contribution.
So $150,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
And really I'm proud because they knew that was important for us, and we've not had that kind of a contribution from a company, and for a fledgling foundation. And so we really do appreciate that, but that also includes some of those important add-ons that we would not, we'd have to use other funding for that, which would include for our scholars that come in.
Tell me a bit about
that kind of generosity from others in other ways as well.
Okay, so 2 questions. What do they get for their 150, and what is this scholar thing that you're talking about?
Well, okay, so what they get, I think, is like companies and organizations would get for their ability of being able to simply, aside from having the satisfaction of knowing that they're doing something that otherwise might not happen in that way.
Do they get their name on a building?
No, they don't. They don't. But we certainly recognize and appreciate that. And you know what? I think if we actually embrace more companies to give them the opportunity to do those kinds of things, though, they will engage. They will engage more, because that's something that is done without question very well in the United States, as you made reference before, and elsewhere. And I think that's something that needs to become, more of our, more of our sort of cultural appreciation in terms of those, those kinds of initiatives.
Okay. Jacques, just about the Scholars Program, what was that?
Okay, so we have actually created a it's the Scholars, the Library and Archives Canada Scholars. I would like to say that those are essentially individuals which we recognize for their outstanding contribution. Canadians who have dedicated their lives to the creation and promotion of our country's cultural and literary and historical heritage.
Okay.
And the first set of recipients were Roch Carrier. Sorry, first set of recipients, I'm going to go back to last year, essentially.
Yeah.
Was Marie-Louise Arsenault, Ronald Cohen, Lawrence Hill, Francis Itani, and Sheila Rogers.
Okay.
All well known in their individual rights and all quite diverse backgrounds as well. This year, which we had to postpone from what was to be our April 22nd event, but we've decided we will hold that event next year on April the 22nd, 2021.
Okay.
And those who have already been informed and we've advised publicly are Roch Carrier, Margaret Atwood, Charlotte Gray, Serge Royal, and Terry O'Reilly.
Okay. Do you hope that these people will be ambassadors and will help you to achieve your goals in raising money and raising profile?
Very good question here. Just by virtue of their DNA, Nigel,
yeah,
they appreciate the kind of things that we appreciate about Library and Archives Canada. So they may not have had an opportunity to be champions, to be ambassadors, as you say, to be individuals that will, cheer Library and Archives Canada for the great work that it does, but also be willing to engage more actively in sharing who we are, what we are, and hopefully participate in some of our programs. And my hope is that over time, our roster or the alumni of our scholars will create, a very dynamic group of individuals, and create that critical mass to share more of that across the country as well.
Good. Okay.
And so that's an important part of our program.
Yeah.
And I hope that one day it has the same kind of distinction as we see, other performing arts awards, or when we're looking at, Order of Canada, because the individuals I just named to you, of course, they've been recognized in many ways, but here we have a national institution that applauds them, that recognizes their value, and praise that they do more of what they've been doing, for Canadian history, for Canadian heritage, and for sharing messages, and including Library and Archives Canada in that as well.
Well, and also, hopefully, I know some of them definitely recognize the fact that this is a bit of a national, I don't want to be too severe, but it is a bit of a national embarrassment, and we need to correct that.
Well, I don't look at it that way, Nigel. I mean, I appreciate it from your critical eye, and you've been at this a long time. I'm, along with with our board members, we are looking at the remarkable things that have gone on in spite of some of the challenges that we've had, let's put it that way.
Okay.
But how phenomenal it is that we had, Guy Berthiaume really setting a fantastic course, navigating Library and Archives Canada at a moment where there were some difficult issues that were obviously there.
Yep.
I look at Leslie Weir, who comes at it also with just such a keen and intelligent eye, and the passion as well, and being able to recognize the value of what Guy Berthiaume, had begun in that effort to move the institution forward.
Yeah.
But I could also add one other element here, is that I love the fact that Leslie Weir is bringing a new dimension to this from her remarkable background, obviously, as someone in the library sciences. So our board, includes Blake Goldring from Toronto, someone very well known in the business community there. Blake has been involved in the business community AGF. He had one of the most significant roles in that organization, that company, and he's someone that has a strong business background, understands the world of investment, understands the world of also institutions, I think, overall. And when our board initially was brought to the attention that here is someone we would want to include from the Toronto community, we were just delighted that he had accepted. And already, he's one of our newest members on the board, but he's added such a remarkable value also because of the work that he does in Canada's military. He has an honorary position also in that context.
Okay.
Then we have Michael Adams, who is a former banker, someone who is very well known here in Ottawa, but has a background from Montreal, a very distinguished background in banking, and in New York as well. He was a past president of the food bank here in Ottawa. He is known to many, and he's just a remarkable individual as well. Kind-hearted and appreciates the value of we appreciate the value certainly of his expertise, because his role essentially is one where he is a responsible and chair of our finance committee.
Okay.
And then Dr. Roseanne O'Reilly-Runta, who is the past president of Carleton University, also remarkable career in Canada, leading institutions such as Victoria College. She was, prior to becoming president of Carleton University, she was at Old Dominion in Virginia. I had the privilege of working with Roseanne when she was coming on board as the president of Carleton University. I was then becoming the chair of the board of governors at Carleton, and she's now the CEO president of the Canadian Foundation for Innovation, and just a remarkable appreciation also of the arts and also business communities. And she has done her share of remarkable fundraising over the years, I may say. And then we have Kevin Hansen, who is the publisher, CEO of Simon & Schuster Canada. As you would know, Simon & Schuster being a global publishing company.
Foreign.
Kevin is well known in the arts community.
Okay.
A number of years ago, Simon & Schuster had the ability of being able to actually publish in Canada. It was a good decision by the Canadian government because there are specific rules on book publishing in this country, and he's already demonstrated 10 times over the incredible value that has added for our authors in Canada, become more widely known in Canada and also internationally. And we needed someone who knows books, understands these things, and has the kind of passion that Kevin has. So how wonderful it is to work with him as well. And then we have Robert Giz, who is a former Premier of Prince Edward Island, Maritimer, someone from Atlantic Canada that knows the ins and outs and appreciates the value of our Canadian institutions. Robert is just so remarkable and so enthusiastic, and someone that comes at it with such a good-hearted manner, and has really helped us out as well.
An untainted politician.
Precisely so. And then Shelley Ambrose. Shelley is known to so many across the country. What a remarkable woman she is. How phenomenal it is that Canadians have been the beneficiary of her great work for many, many years. From her years in radio, the CBC, from her years in working with the publishing community as a writer, and just a remarkably innovative person who took on the walrus as she did, growing that foundation as she did, making that magazine so ultimately Canadian in so many ways, and really, creating, I think, one of the most iconic names in publishing as she has. And that organization is now benefiting. She's just stepped down from the Walrus, and so how grateful we are that while she is so engaged in many ways, she is so focused on our activities at the foundation. And I have to add as well that Shelley is chair of our Scholars Advisory Committee, and that's a big responsibility because we recognize just the significant focus of our foundation in that field right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ronald I. Cohen,
yes,
is just so brilliant in so many different ways.
Churchill's bibliographer.
Precisely, and you know that, and anyone that knows of Churchill that recognizes, from an academic perspective, will all know the amazing 3-volume bibliography that Ron had written and had been published, I believe it was by Oxford University Press a number of years ago, and is this seminal work, really, of the bibliography of Churchill, but he's also written many fantastic articles. But Ron is also someone who loves Library and Archives Canada, and how closely he worked with Marion Scott when she was a librarian, and how they've known each other a long time, I think, which also motivated him, and he was a friends of the library. So it was clear we needed to have Ron on this foundation because he had such a long history and a corporate memory of these things, and he's a great motivator and someone who's donated, a very important collection, as we talked about earlier, the
yes.
Lucy Maud Montgomery collection, which he donated. Now, it must be at least almost 20 years that he had done that.
Yeah.
And continues to be a great friend to Library and Archives Canada. And how well known he is also. He was the past chair of the president, I think it was his role at the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council. So that all brings tremendous value to our board. And then Rory Capern. Rory Capern is just an outstanding young entrepreneur who was over the years involved in Google and actually has recognized from the work that he did at the Weather Channel, I guess it was Palmorris is the company, the potential opportunities for dealing with our information and sharing that on various sites and other locations that we might not think of otherwise. So he's involved in some of that, but he was a former director of Twitter Canada, and appreciates the nature of all of these new and innovative social platforms that I think will benefit us. And we are working very closely with a number of institutions now and organizations in the media sector through the work that Rory does, and through some of our other board members as well. And clearly, I have to say, Leslie Weir, while she is she's not per se on the board, she obviously is by virtue of her presence, and an important one, to engage meaningfully with us in her role as a librarian archivist. And Carole Chouinard, who is our honorary general counsel, someone who has had lots of experience with charitable institutions from her work, and she is one of my partners at Gowling WLG and adds tremendous value. So we're very grateful also for the support of those from within Library Archives Canada working closely, with us, which includes Linda Savoy and also Renee Harnden, who had, lots of value. And I can name a whole bunch of other names
sure.
as well.
Okay, so I've got one question here. Have you given each one of these directors a fundraising quota?
So that is that's an interesting question to raise. Well, let me share with you. We will hopefully this time next year have an additional, certainly 2, probably 3 additional directors, so that we really have the additional representation that we want. And I can tell you we're looking at some outstanding directors. And as you would imagine, we have a matrix of characteristics, strengths that each of these board directors have, so that we maximize on that as much as possible. As you will appreciate, Nigel, and I'm sure from your experience as well, there are some board members that play very significant roles in one area, but less so in another.
Yeah.
Yet, everybody on this board recognizes the importance of actually reaching out to those with whom they believe they have an ability of being able to reach out and and seek funds.
Yeah.
So everyone will have that role. To say that we have a quota, I've been on foundation boards, I've been on a number of boards. I've never been given a quota, but I know what we look for and what we want to do.
Maybe you should start something.
Who makes their own contribution
Sure.
as well. But there's no doubt that among the requirements is the ability of being able to, like any foundation board, seek and ensure that the funds that we acquire will add value to the institution that we wish to assist.
Sure. When I first heard about this, I thought, well, why doesn't Library and Archives Canada have a director of development? Are they going to hire someone like that?
Precisely, we will. One of the things that we are doing, and we're also really careful, this is a hard-working board.
Yeah.
This is a board where we are engaging because we are starting off. These are early days. I can tell you that the board at our last retreat in November had a phenomenal presentation by Tom DeQuino, who is well known nationally for his remarkable work in a number of fields in the business community. And until a few months ago was the chair, I think for something almost 20 years, chair of the National Gallery Foundation. So when he came to meet with us and provided us with his hour presentation, which we did not want to end because it was so interesting.
Right.
It told a story, and it told a story of those earliest moments in the history of the foundation of the National Gallery. And it also demonstrated to us that we need to be patient. We can't do everything overnight. They have raised millions of dollars. The foundation has added paintings to the collection that wouldn't otherwise be there. It has actually accessed funds through, from banks, from major companies in Canada, and the philanthropy clearly that we see from many Canadians is alive and well as a result of the great work that Tom did, and as I say, Michael Adams, who's also on that board, and others on that foundation. So we want to learn from that.
Okay.
We will have a director of development. We certainly do, an advancement. We want to have that, but we have to have enough funds to be able to do that. And I would rather, for this moment, that the money that we are able to access from Canadians and from companies and others, as you mentioned, go into specific funding for going to particular initiatives and programming. And once we have the solid base, clearly we will want to make sure that we have someone that addresses that advancement constantly, with the kind of organization that the foundation has at the National Gallery. I'm going to use the example also of the National Arts Center. I mean, it's so remarkable. I'm very fortunate to have a great relationship through some of the work I've done over the years, also the National Arts Center, with Jane Watson. And so we compare and share notes, and I think we just have to be patient as to how we do that so that our funds are best utilized at this time for what it's really intended for.
Okay. So one of the challenges is to find billionaire bibliophiles. How are you going to do that?
Well, we're doing some research work. You're touching on a really good point, because one of the things that is clear to us is that we have to find those that love books, those that feel it is part of their fabric, and those that then will understand the need to give.
Well, yeah, and I think, Jacques, also those who love Canada.
Absolutely. Well, and look, I think that we're in a most fortunate position, Nigel. We are truly, if you look at it for what we hold, we're the gallery of everything.
Yes.
We are the everything gallery.
Yes.
You name it, we have it.
Well, that's what's so fabulous about books, isn't it?
It's not easy to necessarily uncover at times, because you've got this magnificent preservation center one, which is in Gatineau. There's another one. Only occasionally do we get to see some of that collection, although I have to say we're doing pretty well on the digitization, but we can do a lot more. I mean, there's such a small percentage right now. But just think of it, when we go to someone who loves books,
yes,
well, we can talk about the books we have. We can talk about the Jacob Loewy collection, which is one of the most magnificent collections in the world of, Judaica books. But we have that here in
Yes,
Canada.
yes.
Clearly one of the most remarkable, which was a gift of many years ago from Jacob Loewy, who had a true passion for books which really go back to the 1500s, 1400s. What we're seeing there is amazing. But then we also look at some of the other collections, and we will be very careful and very mindful that when we approach someone, we're going to try to approach them on what it is that they love. As we talked about sports before, we're going to go to someone who loves, if we go to someone who loves sports, this is what we collect. If it's someone who loves maps, this is what we collect. If it's music, it's this. If it's the arts, look at these magnificent portraits we have.
Yes.
And so, and on and on. So we're very lucky with this collection to go for anything.
As we've said, you can go to each different industrial sector and present amazing collections on shipping and mining and farming and everything.
And the railroads.
Yeah.
Which built this country.
Yeah.
Here we are. We have things that they would not imagine we have.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
And that's the
we've got them, and most people don't know it.
That's right. And the thing is, when they give, Nigel, they're grateful that they've had that opportunity to be able to give it. There's a remarkable story I'm going to share with you. I mean, and it really resonated very much with me when I first heard it. An individual dies 3 times. An individual dies when that individual is no longer living, not with us. An individual dies when those that knew that individual, the last one that knew that individual, dies. And then the 3rd time that individual dies is when no one utters the name and no one sees the name and there's no recognition of that name. So we give the gift of being able to make sure that when they add their value to an institution, they get to live for a long time, and we are their beneficiaries.
Well, that holds true for books, like your children's books. As long as they're around, you're not dead.
Well, thank you very much for adding that. And there are messages in there that I hope live for a long time. They live for a long time. That's what motivated me to write those children's stories. And in fact, there will be another one that was really built on a lullaby that my mother wrote many years ago, which will be coming out next spring. And I'm hoping that if we can somehow continue the tradition, that launch in Canada will take place at Library Archives Canada's facilities. But it will be a launch that will take place in New York. But it's true. I mean, the idea of books is they can last, they can live forever. And what's remarkable is the messages that are shared at a moment in time will also change from moment to moment.
Yeah.
Books that didn't have the relevance they may have had at one time become more relevant. And, they go up and down. But the fact is that they are out there, and they're worlds that basically continue. And we allow them to continue by reading them and thinking about them.
Well, it's like books about the Spanish flu. So let's hope that the flu disappears, not magically, but through science and cooperation of Canadians, and that the next time we talk, it's in person.
I so hope so, and I so look forward to that. And I'm really grateful to you for giving me the opportunity to share this. Nigel, I know you're doing great work, and how terrific it is that you provide your bibliophile vehicle in the way that you do for Canadians, and I know beyond our borders as well. I have to say one other point, if you may let me. When we look at the challenges we have, and we look at the protests that are taking place in Canada, in the United States, and elsewhere, by virtue of the racism that has obviously become more obvious to us. It's there, but it just became so much more obvious after the killing, I have to say, of George Floyd.
Murder.
So my sense is that gives us even more of a reason to do what we are doing. We need to look at this head on. We have to engage in understanding who we are and what we are more so. I am confident, God willing, I am confident that we will have a vaccine soon enough, or we'll be able to have the antidotes that are necessary to deal with COVID-19. I'm not as certain that we can come up with an injection, to inoculate a vaccine that'll address racism. I wish we could. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
Hatred, prejudice, and racism. So, as we likely won't be able to do that, then our mission becomes that much stronger to work on the things that we are through such vehicles as Library Archives Canada, through universities, through others, that obviously have a role to play with our politicians, with every individual clearly, to make sure that we are better for it from what we learn and what we appreciate from our past, so that our future is going to be a better one.
Very good. Now, is there a website?
Yes, there is. And I'm hoping that by the moment you put this podcast out there, it will be up and running.
Okay.
We are in the midst of just finishing off, the details of it, but I'm confident that in the next couple of days it will be up.
Great. So what is the new address?
lackfoundation.ca.
Very good. Jacques Shore is a lawyer and partner with Gowling WLG's Ottawa office and chair of the Library and Archives Canada Foundation. Thanks very much for being here with me.
Nigel, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. All the best to you, and stay safe.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.